The day of the wedding arrived with a golden morning that promised joy and laughter. The mansion stood tall, its white walls gleaming under the sun, decorated with flowers that swayed gently in the breeze. Guests arrived in shiny cars, stepping out in elegant clothes, their laughter echoing across the wide lawns. Everyone seemed excited, talking about the decorations, the food, and the grandeur of the event. In the midst of all this, behind the scenes, a young girl moved quietly. She was the daughter of the cleaner, someone who spent most of her life working in the background, helping her mother with chores, carrying baskets of laundry, wiping surfaces, and making sure everything was spotless. Unlike the guests, she did not wear expensive clothes or sparkling jewelry. Her dress was simple, her hair neatly tied back, and her shoes were worn. She had grown used to blending into the background, to being overlooked by those around her. Her morning had started early. Before anyone else arrived, she had helped her mother sweep the floors, polish the silverware, and arrange the chairs and tables. She had learned long ago that preparation and attention to detail mattered, even if no one thanked you for it. But today something felt different. Today she noticed the hum of excitement in the air, the way the sunlight reflected on the crystal chandeliers, and the soft notes of music drifting from a distant room where the band was setting up. She paused for a moment to watch the musicians tune their instruments. There was a grand piano in the corner, shiny and black, its surface reflecting the sunlight. She felt drawn to it instantly. Her fingers twitched as if they remembered something long forgotten. She had loved the piano ever since she was little. Her mother could not afford lessons, but she had taught herself by watching videos and listening to music whenever she could. The piano had been her secret friend, her escape, her world. She rarely played in front of anyone, afraid that people would laugh or ignore her. As she helped arrange the last few chairs, she noticed the millionaire host speaking to some of the guests. He was tall, well-dressed, with a commanding presence. His smile was wide, but his eyes had a sharpness to them, a hint of superiority. He laughed loudly, gesturing at the piano, making a few jokes. "This piano has been here for years and no one dares to play it," he said. "I guess we need someone brave enough to make it sing. Anyone here think they're worthy?" He chuckled, and the guests laughed along with him, some clapping lightly at his playful remark. The girl stood a little further away, pretending to adjust a flower vase, but her ears perked up. She felt a flutter in her chest. Was he mocking her? Or the idea that someone ordinary could play something extraordinary? She didn't know, but she felt a pull toward the piano that she could not ignore. For a moment, she just watched. People were smiling, taking pictures, talking, drinking champagne, and she felt invisible, as she often did. But the piano called to her, and she imagined her fingers on its smooth keys, imagining the music she could create. Her mother approached quietly, holding a tray of glasses. "Be careful. Stay out of the way," she whispered softly, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Don't get noticed. Just help me." But the girl shook her head slightly. She wanted more than just to be a helper today. She wanted to try, even if it was only for a moment. The millionaire noticed movement near the piano and turned. His sharp eyes landed on the girl. He raised an eyebrow, a smirk forming on his lips. "And who is this?" he asked, his voice dripping with amusement. "A little girl from the staff? Do you play, or are you just here to sweep the floors?" The room quieted for a moment as people glanced at her. Some whispered among themselves. The girl felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wanted to disappear. But she felt her fingers tingle, remembering the countless times she had imagined this moment in secret. She nodded slightly, unsure if it was brave or foolish. The millionaire laughed louder this time. "Well, I hope you're better than your uniform suggests. Come, show us what you got." His tone was mocking, and he expected her to run away, embarrassed. But something inside her refused to. She walked toward the piano, her heart pounding like a drum. Every step seemed louder than the last. The guests had turned their attention, some curious, some laughing softly, thinking this would be amusing. She noticed the sparkling gowns, the expensive watches, the polite smiles, and felt suddenly very small. She wanted to vanish, yet her feet moved forward, drawn to the piano as if it were a magnet. When she reached it, she brushed her fingers across the cool surface of the keys. They were smooth, cold, and beautiful. She took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm despite the nervousness swirling in her stomach. The millionaire leaned closer, his smirk unwavering. "Go ahead. Don't hurt the piano too much," he joked, thinking he would embarrass her in front of everyone. The girl's hands hovered over the keys. She felt her nerves like tiny electric shocks, but also a strange thrill. She remembered the countless hours she had spent teaching herself, imagining notes and melodies, letting her emotions guide her fingers. Music had always been her refuge, and now, even in front of this crowd, she felt that familiar comfort return. As she pressed the first key, a soft note filled the room. It was simple, almost shy, but it was honest. She closed her eyes, letting the music flow from her heart. The millionaire raised an eyebrow, leaning back, clearly expecting something ordinary, something awkward. But as the second note, then the third rang out, there was a subtle shift. The notes were not just sound, they were emotion. The piano seemed to come alive under her hands. Her fingers danced across the keys, moving with a confidence that surprised even her. The room, once filled with chatter and laughter, grew quiet. Guests turned to listen, some holding their breath. Even the musicians paused, their instruments in hand, as if sensing that something remarkable was happening. Her music told a story that words could not. It spoke of quiet mornings watching the sun rise, of secret dreams and hopes, of struggles no one noticed. Each chord was filled with feeling, each note a reflection of her life. People began to lean forward, eyes wide, smiles fading into astonishment. The millionaire, who had been so confident moments ago, now looked surprised. His smirk disappeared, replaced by a thoughtful frown. No one had expected such talent to come from someone so unassuming. The cleaner's daughter, once invisible, was now the center of attention, though she did not seem to notice. She was lost in the music, feeling every note and letting it carry her. Her mother, standing quietly to the side, felt tears prick at her eyes. She had always known her daughter was special, but seeing her like this, commanding attention without even trying, filled her with pride. The staff who had been working nearby stopped for a moment, leaning against doorways or countertops, watching in awe. The sound of the piano seemed to touch everyone, cutting through the noise and the laughter, bringing a sense of wonder and surprise. The millionaire finally spoke, but his voice lacked its usual sharpness. She's actually very good, he admitted quietly, almost to himself. The guests murmured, nodding in agreement. What had started as a joke, a moment meant to entertain at the expense of the girl, had turned into something no one expected. The piano sang under her hands, not because of her desire to impress, but because she had dared to step forward and trust her own ability. As the first piece came to an end, there was a long pause. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting to see what would happen next. Some guests began to clap softly, then more joined in until the applause filled the entire hall. The girl opened her eyes, startled, blinking at the faces around her. She had never received such attention before, and yet for a brief moment it felt natural. She smiled shyly, bowing her head, acknowledging the unexpected praise. The millionaire, still standing, clapped slowly, a new respect forming in his expression. He had intended to humiliate her, to entertain his guests at her expense, but instead he had witnessed something extraordinary. The girl, who had always been in the background, had turned the tables without trying. Her courage, her talent, and her heart had made everyone stop and pay attention. In that moment, the mansion was no longer just a place of wealth and celebration. It had become a space where talent and bravery, regardless of one's background, could shine brightly. The girl stepped back from the piano, her hands still tingling from the music. She felt a mixture of relief, pride, and a strange new confidence. She had done something that day she never imagined she could. The millionaire, once amused by her presence, now regarded her differently. The wedding continued around them, but a subtle change had taken place. People talked in whispers, glances of admiration following the girl wherever she moved. And though she returned to helping her mother, carrying trays and tidying chairs, a quiet glow of triumph stayed with her, hidden in her smile. The day had begun as any other, with expectations of order and ceremony, but for the cleaner's daughter, it had become a turning point. She had faced ridicule and dared to play anyway, and in doing so she had shown that courage, even from the most humble place, could transform the ordinary into something unforgettable. After the applause faded, the girl stepped back from the piano, her heart still racing. She felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. The room was buzzing with whispers, and she could feel the eyes of the guests on her. Some looked impressed, some curious, and a few seemed shocked that someone from the staff could play so beautifully. She had never experienced this kind of attention before. It was overwhelming, but also exhilarating. She tried to steady her hands as she returned to helping her mother, carrying a tray of glasses across the grand hall. Every step felt heavier because she was aware of how different the atmosphere had become. Her mother gave her a quiet nod, a mixture of pride and concern. She had seen her daughter's talent grow in secret over the years, but she also knew how unpredictable wealthy guests could be. "Careful," she whispered, her voice gentle but firm. "They may admire you now, but don't let it go to your head." The girl nodded, understanding, but she felt a spark inside her that she had never felt before. She wanted to continue to show what she could really do, but she also knew that one wrong step could ruin everything. Meanwhile, the millionaire was still standing near the piano, his expression unreadable. He had intended to make fun of the girl, to amuse himself and his guests at her expense. But the moment he heard her play, all of that changed. He had never expected such talent from someone so young and so humble. He found himself staring at her, not with amusement, but with a strange sense of respect. He had always believed that wealth and opportunity were the keys to greatness. Yet here was a girl with neither, yet possessing something far more valuable: raw, undeniable talent. Guests slowly began to approach the piano, their curiosity getting the better of them. A few whispered to each other, amazed that someone from the background staff could play with such skill. Some of the older guests exchanged glances, murmuring about their own children or grandchildren, wondering why they had never shown this kind of passion or discipline. The girl kept her eyes down, trying to stay humble, but she could not help noticing the attention. She felt nervous, but she also felt a strange sense of pride. This was the first time she had been seen not as a cleaner's daughter, but as someone with real talent. As the day went on, the atmosphere in the mansion continued to shift. The wedding party was lively, but the presence of the piano in the corner and the girl's earlier performance created a subtle change. People were no longer just mingling and laughing. They were observing, wondering, remembering the music that had filled the room. Even the musicians who had been setting up earlier were now quiet, some watching her from a distance, curious about the skill they had just witnessed. The girl felt a mixture of fear and excitement, unsure of what to do next. Should she play again if asked, or stay hidden and let the moment pass? The millionaire, watching closely, decided to test her further. He approached her cautiously, still maintaining a polite smile, though there was a hint of curiosity and challenge in his eyes. "That was unexpected," he said slowly. "I didn't think someone from your background could play like that. Do you play often?" His tone was careful, almost cautious, as if he were afraid of insulting her. The girl hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. She nodded slightly, murmuring, "I practice when I can." She didn't want to boast, but she also wanted him to understand that this was not a fluke, that she had spent years learning in secret. The millionaire's eyes softened, but he did not smile fully. "Years of practice in secret," he said thoughtfully. "That takes dedication. Most people would give up long before they reached this level." His words were not mocking anymore. They carried weight, an acknowledgement of her hard work. The girl felt a flicker of confidence. For the first time, someone from the outside world recognized her effort, not just the result. She nodded again, shyly, and turned back to the piano, her fingers lightly brushing the keys as if testing the air. Guests began to gather around again, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. They whispered among themselves, amazed that a girl they had overlooked could possess such skill. Some of the younger guests were inspired, realizing that talent could come from anywhere, not just from wealth or privilege. The atmosphere shifted from amusement to genuine admiration. Even the other staff, who had often felt invisible, watched in quiet awe. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, all attention focused on the girl and the piano. The millionaire, observing the reactions of the guests, began to realize something important. He had always believed that success was tied to money, connections, and power. Yet here was a girl with none of those things, captivating an entire room with nothing but her talent and courage. He felt a strange mixture of humility and curiosity. He wanted to understand her, to see what drove her, but he also felt the sting of surprise. He had underestimated her, as he often underestimated those he considered beneath him. Encouraged by the attention and the shifting energy, the girl decided to take a small risk. She began to play again, softly at first, letting her fingers find the notes she had practiced countless times in secret. The music was different now, more confident, more fluid, and filled with emotion. Each note carried a story, a piece of her life, her struggles, her dreams. The guests listened, some holding their breath, some closing their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The room, once filled with casual chatter and polite laughter, was now enveloped in a quiet reverence. As she played, she noticed the millionaire watching intently. His expression was no longer amused. It was thoughtful, almost reflective. She could sense that he was processing more than just her skill. He was realizing that talent, determination, and courage could not be measured by wealth or status. The room seemed to shrink around her, focusing entirely on the music. The girl felt a strange calm, a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. In that moment, she was not a cleaner's daughter or a background staff member. She was a musician, and the world was listening. The music flowed effortlessly, each note blending into the next, creating a melody that was both powerful and gentle. Guests were captivated, some whispering to each other about how unexpected and moving it was. The musicians who had been preparing earlier were now watching closely, impressed by her technique and expression. Even the millionaire's staff, who had often treated her mother and her with indifference, now looked on with newfound respect. The girl felt a quiet pride not in showing off, but in sharing something that had always been a part of her, a secret gift that she could no longer keep hidden. After several minutes, she paused, letting the final note linger in the air. The silence that followed was filled with awe and appreciation. For a moment, no one spoke. Then slowly, applause began to ripple through the room. It started softly, then grew louder until the entire hall was filled with clapping and cheers. The girl's cheeks turned red and she bowed her head, feeling shy but proud. She had stepped out of the shadows and dared to show her true self. The applause was not just for her skill, it was for her courage, her willingness to take a chance, and her ability to touch the hearts of everyone present. The millionaire approached her once more, this time with a genuine smile. "I misjudged you," he said quietly. "I thought this would be a joke, but you've proven me wrong. You have something very rare, something special. Do not waste it." His words, spoken sincerely, carried weight. The girl felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, someone powerful and influential had acknowledged her talent without judgment or ridicule. As the wedding continued, the girl returned to her duties, but the world around her had changed. Guests now treated her differently, some nodding respectfully, others whispering about her performance. The staff looked at her with admiration, inspired by what they had witnessed. She carried trays, tidied chairs, and helped with preparations, but inside, she felt a new sense of confidence. She had faced ridicule, stepped forward, and shared her gift. And in doing so, she had transformed not just the room, but herself. By the end of the day, the mansion was alive with music, laughter, and celebration. The girl had learned something important. Talent and courage could not be ignored. No matter where you came from, or what others thought of you, stepping forward and trusting yourself could create moments of magic. The millionaire, once mocking and arrogant, had been humbled by her gift, and she had discovered that her music, her secret talent, could open doors she had never imagined. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow across the mansion, she glanced at the piano one last time. She knew that this was only the beginning. The applause, the attention, and the admiration were not the goal. They were reminders that she had something powerful within her, a gift that could not remain hidden forever. She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of excitement and determination. One day she thought she would play again, not just at weddings, but for people who truly understood and appreciated her music. And when that day came, nothing would stop her. The room had quieted down again after the girl's first few melodies had floated into the air. Guests were still talking in low voices, their eyes darting toward the piano as if the music had opened a door to something unexpected and profound. The girl, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and confidence, returned to the piano for a moment. Her fingers lightly touched the keys as though testing the air, listening for the notes she would create next. Something inside her told her this moment was different from any other she had experienced before. She was no longer simply playing for herself or secretly practicing. She was playing for everyone, and yet, it felt deeply personal, as if each note told a piece of her own story. The millionaire, who had watched her earlier with surprise and curiosity, now stood closer, observing every movement, every expression on her face. There was no smirk, no hint of mockery. Instead, he was quiet, leaning slightly as if trying to understand how someone so ordinary by his standards could possess such extraordinary skill. He had seen musicians before, famous ones, trained and polished, but this girl, she had an honesty, a raw emotion in her playing that no amount of training could replicate. He realized that talent like this came not just from practice, but from heart, from life experience, from a story that demanded to be told through music. The girl began to play again, softly at first, letting her fingers find the keys she had touched thousands of times in secret. The melody was gentle, almost shy, yet each note carried an unspoken strength. It was the kind of music that seemed to reach into the heart, touching people in ways words never could. Guests turned in their chairs, leaning slightly forward, drawn in by the sound. Their conversation stopped, their eyes fixed on her hands moving effortlessly across the piano. Even the musicians, who were experts themselves, paused, watching with a mix of disbelief and admiration. The room, filled moments ago with laughter and polite chatter, had been transformed into a space of wonder. As she continued, the melody grew bolder. Her fingers danced across the keys, moving with precision and grace. The notes intertwined like threads in a tapestry, telling a story that was both personal and universal. It was a tale of struggle, of quiet perseverance, of dreams nurtured in silence. Every guest could feel it differently, but everyone felt something. Some felt nostalgia, thinking of their own forgotten passions. Others felt inspiration, imagining what they could achieve if they had the courage to follow their dreams. And some, like the millionaire, felt a profound respect for the girl, realizing that he had been wrong to underestimate her. He shifted slightly, leaning against the piano bench as he watched her. He could see the focus in her eyes, the gentle tension in her shoulders, the subtle movements of her fingers. It was as if she and the piano were one, connected in a way that could not be taught or bought. He realized that this moment was not about showing off wealth or status. It was about recognizing true talent when it appeared, even from the most unexpected places. The thought made him pause. He had spent so much of his life measuring people by what they had, what they wore, and what connections they could offer. Here was a girl with none of that, yet she had captured the attention of everyone in the room with something far more valuable: her heart and skill. The melody shifted again, softer now, more reflective. The girl's hands moved almost instinctively, as if guided by the music itself. Her eyes closed briefly, and the guests felt a shift in the atmosphere. The music seemed to wrap around them, carrying the weight of untold stories, of quiet struggles, of moments that often went unnoticed. Some guests leaned back, lost in thought, their eyes distant. Others whispered to each other in amazement, unable to comprehend how someone so young and from such humble beginnings could play with such depth and emotion. The girl, absorbed in her music, barely noticed the attention. She was focused on the piano, on the story she wanted to tell through each note. Minutes passed, yet the room remained entranced. The millionaire's mind raced. He had thought he knew talent, thought he understood excellence, but he had been proven wrong. He watched the subtle expressions on the girl's face, the way her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, how her posture and breathing seemed perfectly in sync with the music. It was not just skill, it was understanding, intuition, and emotion combined. He felt something stir inside him, a mixture of admiration, humility, and curiosity. He wanted to understand her, to know how someone with no formal training could possess such a gift. The guests were equally captivated. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the music in ways they could not articulate. Others were whispering, exchanging glances of disbelief as if to say, "Can this really be happening?" The atmosphere in the mansion had shifted entirely. It was no longer a wedding filled only with laughter, chatter, and opulence. It had become a stage for something extraordinary, a moment that none of the attendees would forget. Even the staff, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, felt a sense of pride. They had known her quietly, had seen her practice in hidden corners, and now they were witnesses to her triumph. As the melody built, the girl's confidence grew. She allowed herself to explore more daring passages, moving faster across the keys, her hands almost flying. The music became more complex, weaving emotion and technical skill together seamlessly. The guests were silent now, mesmerized. The millionaire watched, leaning slightly, noticing the subtle nuances of her playing, the way she expressed feelings that words could never capture. He realized that she was not just playing the piano, she was speaking through it, communicating something deeply human that could not be taught in any classroom or learned from wealth. The girl's music reached a climax. a powerful and emotional peak that filled the room completely. Guests held their breath, captivated by the intensity and beauty of the sound. Some felt goosebumps rise along their arms, others felt tears prick their eyes. It was impossible not to feel something in that moment. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a voice, and she had found a way to make it sing like never before. The millionaire, usually composed and confident in any situation, found himself moved, surprised by the sheer impact of her talent. He had never expected this from someone he had intended to ridicule. When the final note lingered and slowly faded, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then applause erupted. It started softly, then swelled, filling every corner of the hall. The girl opened her eyes, surprised at the intensity of the reaction. She looked around and saw smiles, tears, and admiration from people she had never imagined would notice her. The music had spoken louder than any words could, and the audience had understood. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a quiet pride, and a sense of belonging she had never felt before. The millionaire stepped forward, clapping slowly. His eyes, once filled with amusement, now held genuine respect. "That was remarkable," he said quietly, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "I underestimated you. You have something very rare." His words were sincere, and she could feel the weight behind them. He had intended to mock her, to entertain his guests at her expense, yet he had been humbled by her skill and courage. The realization struck him that talent and dedication could come from anywhere, and that greatness was not defined by wealth or status. Guests continued to whisper, some praising her bravery, some complimenting her technical skill, and some simply marveling at the emotional depth of her playing. The girl, still standing by the piano, felt a mix of shyness and pride. She had faced ridicule and fear, yet she had chosen to step forward and share her gift. And in doing so, she had touched everyone in the room in a way no one had anticipated. The applause slowly subsided, but the feeling lingered. People continued to glance at her, some with admiration, some with curiosity, but all with a newfound respect. Her mother, standing quietly nearby, wiped her eyes and smiled. She had always believed in her daughter's talent, but seeing it recognized in this way was overwhelming. She felt pride, relief, and happiness all at once. She had taught her daughter to be humble, to work hard, and to persevere, but she had never imagined a moment like this. The daughter's courage had transformed not just her life, but the way everyone in the room saw her. The girl turned back to the piano, lightly touching the keys again, almost instinctively. She wanted to play more, to continue sharing the music that had been inside her for so long. The millionaire watched her, a thoughtful expression on his face. He had been challenged in a way he had never expected. He realized that this girl, who had been invisible to the world, had reminded him of something important, that talent, courage, and heart could not be measured by wealth or position. He felt a mixture of humility and curiosity, wanting to see where her journey would lead, and perhaps even to help her in ways he had never helped anyone before. The guests slowly returned to their conversations, but the energy in the room had changed. They were no longer merely celebrating a wedding. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something rare. The girl had transformed the moment with her courage and talent, leaving a mark on everyone present. Even as the music faded into the background, the memory of her playing lingered, filling the hearts of all who had heard it. As the day continued, the girl helped her mother with small tasks, but she moved with a new confidence. She had stepped out of the shadows, faced ridicule, and shared her gift. And in doing so, she had transformed not just the room, but herself. She had learned that courage and talent could break through barriers, and that the world could notice even the most unexpected people when they dared to show their true selves. After the last note faded, the room remained alive with energy. Guests were still murmuring to one another, their eyes occasionally flicking to the piano, still filled with wonder at what they had just witnessed. The girl had returned to her mother's side, helping with small tasks, adjusting a napkin here, carrying a glass there, but she moved differently now. There was a quiet confidence in the way she held herself, a sense that she had stepped out of the shadows and claimed her moment. She no longer felt invisible, not entirely, and that gave her a strange but comforting warmth in her chest. The millionaire, who had been standing silently, still observing her, finally spoke. His voice carried a new tone, not mocking, not superior, but curious and respectful. "I did not expect that," he said quietly. more to himself than anyone else. He stepped closer, studying the girl with renewed interest. "You have something very rare. Most people never find it in themselves, and yet here you are, showing it so effortlessly." His words, while calm, had weight. The girl looked up at him, unsure of what to say. She had faced his sarcasm earlier, his laughter at the thought of her playing the piano, and now he was speaking to her with something she had never experienced from someone so powerful: genuine respect. Around them, the guests began to adjust. A few approached cautiously, offering compliments and curious questions. "Where did you learn to play like that?" one asked, eyes wide. "I've never seen anyone play with so much feeling," said another. The girl's heart raced. She wanted to answer, to explain, but words felt small compared to the music she had just created. Instead, she smiled shyly and nodded, letting the music speak for her. She realized that in moments like this, her talent could communicate more than words ever could. The atmosphere in the mansion began to change in subtle but unmistakable ways. Guests who had initially laughed at the thought of her playing were now whispering, exchanging glances of admiration. Some seemed almost apologetic for underestimating her. Even the staff, who had often felt invisible themselves, looked on with pride. They had seen her practice in secret, had watched her dedicate hours to her craft, and now they were witnesses to her triumph. The room that had once been filled with polite conversation and laughter was now filled with quiet awe and recognition. The millionaire, still watching, began to notice the small gestures from the guests. People were complimenting her, some even suggesting that she should play again, not just for this audience but for others as well. He could see the subtle shift in perception, how someone who had been considered insignificant in that setting was now commanding attention, respect, and admiration. He had never seen it happen before, and it made him pause. For the first time, he realized that wealth and status could not create talent or courage. Those were gifts that came from within, and he had witnessed it firsthand. The girl, encouraged by the whispers and the attention, approached the piano once more. Her fingers hovered above the keys, and she felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She did not need to prove herself anymore. The applause and admiration from the guests were proof enough, but something inside her urged her to continue, to share more of her music, to tell more of her story. She pressed the first key gently, and a soft, flowing melody began to fill the room again. This time there was no hesitation. Each note was deliberate, confident, and full of emotion. The guests leaned forward, captivated by the depth and sincerity of her performance. As she played, the millionaire took a step closer, listening intently. He could see the intensity in her eyes, the way her body moved with the music, how her emotions were poured into every note. It was not just technical skill. It was storytelling, a way of connecting with everyone in the room without speaking a single word. He realized that this moment was bigger than he had imagined. He had intended to mock her, to amuse his guests, but she had turned the tables completely. She had transformed the space, captured the attention of everyone present, and left a lasting impression that no joke or sarcasm could erase. Guests began to approach more confidently. Some offered words of praise, others asked if she had formal training, and a few seemed eager to encourage her to play even more. The girl felt a sense of validation that she had never known. She had spent years practicing in secret, believing her music was something personal, something hidden, and now it was being recognized, appreciated, and celebrated. She felt a wave of gratitude, not for the applause itself, but for the acknowledgement of her dedication and talent. The millionaire, observing all of this, felt a growing respect for her. He had always believed that influence, money, and connections could open doors and create opportunities. But here was proof that real talent, courage, and heart could open doors no wealth ever could. He stepped closer and said, "You have the ability to move people in ways I never imagined. Keep playing, and you will find that the world will listen." His words were sincere, carrying a weight that surprised both of them. For a girl who had lived most of her life unnoticed, this was more than praise. It was recognition from someone who held power, influence, and the attention of an entire room. The girl returned to the piano, feeling a mixture of excitement and calm. She allowed her fingers to move freely, exploring melodies that were bold, playful, and emotional. The guests, now fully engaged, listened intently, some with tears in their eyes, some with wide smiles, and others with thoughtful expressions, as they reflected on the power of her music. The room was no longer just a wedding hall. It had become a space of inspiration, proof that talent and courage could shine in the most unexpected places. As she played, small changes became noticeable. Guests began taking photos not just of the wedding but of her, capturing the moment they realized that greatness could come from anywhere. People whispered to one another about her potential, imagining the opportunities that might await someone with her skill and heart. Even the other staff members, who often felt overlooked, began to exchange glances of encouragement, silently celebrating her success. The atmosphere had shifted completely, from amusement and casual conversation to respect, admiration, and hope. The millionaire, who had once intended to belittle her, now found himself reflecting on his own life and assumptions. He realized that he had underestimated people based on appearances, status, and privilege, and that real talent could not be measured by those things. He felt a sense of humility he rarely experienced, a quiet recognition that he had learned something valuable in the span of a few minutes. The girl had not only transformed the room with her music, but she had also shifted his perspective, leaving him to consider how many other hidden talents he might have overlooked in his life. As the music continued, more guests approached her with genuine interest. They asked if she had ever performed publicly, if she had considered pursuing music professionally, and if she would play again. The girl felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She had never performed for an audience this large, and she had certainly never imagined being asked to do so by people she had once thought would never notice her. Yet she found herself smiling, realizing that this was not about showing off or proving herself. It was about sharing something she loved, something that had always been a part of her, and allowing others to experience it as well. Her mother watched quietly, a mixture of pride and emotion on her face. She had always known her daughter had talent, but seeing it recognized in this way was overwhelming. She felt a deep sense of happiness and relief, knowing that her daughter's courage had created a moment of transformation. The girl's music had not only captivated the guests, but had also changed the way they perceived her, elevating her from someone overlooked to someone admired, respected, and celebrated. As the performance continued, the room seemed to shrink around her, focusing entirely on the music. Every note, every chord, and every subtle shift in tempo conveyed emotion and depth. Guests were silent, captivated by the skill and heart behind each melody. The millionaire stood nearby, unable to take his eyes off her, his previous arrogance replaced by awe and respect. He had intended to entertain at her expense, but instead, he had witnessed something rare and beautiful, something that would remain in the memory of everyone present long after the wedding ended. Finally, as the last note lingered, the girl leaned back slightly, breathing gently, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The applause began slowly, then swelled into a roar of appreciation. Guests clapped, cheered, and even whistled, expressing their admiration and amazement. The girl's cheeks flushed and she bowed her head, feeling shy yet proud. She had dared to step forward, to play despite fear and uncertainty, and she had been rewarded not just with applause but with recognition, respect, and newfound confidence. The millionaire approached her once more, this time with a small smile. "I misjudged you," he said quietly. "You have more talent and courage than I have seen in a long time. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." His words were sincere, and they carried more weight than any compliment could. The girl felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet sense of triumph and hope. She had faced ridicule, stepped forward, and shared her gift, and in doing so she had changed not only the room but herself. By the end of the evening, the atmosphere in the mansion had shifted completely. Guests who had arrived expecting a typical wedding were leaving with a story they would tell for years, a story of courage, talent, and the unexpected brilliance of a girl who had dared to play the piano. Even the staff felt inspired, reminded that hidden talent could shine when given the chance, and the girl herself, once invisible, now moved with confidence. Aware that her music had the power to touch hearts, inspire others, and open doors she had never imagined. In that moment, she understood something important. Recognition, admiration, and opportunity were not given. They were earned through courage, dedication, and the willingness to step into the light, even when the world expected you to remain in the shadows. And as she glanced at the piano one last time that night, she knew that her journey had only just begun, and that the music inside her would continue to guide her toward moments of transformation, connection, and inspiration for years to come. The wedding celebrations continued into the evening, the mansion still alive with music, laughter, and conversation. Yet in the midst of the grand party, a quiet transformation had taken place. Guests who had come expecting an elegant event with polite smiles and routine entertainment were now talking about something far more remarkable. They spoke in hushed tones about the girl who had played the piano, her music lingering in their minds, her talent impossible to forget. People who had once overlooked her were now acknowledging her presence, their eyes filled with admiration and curiosity. The girl, moving with her mother as she helped clean a few stray glasses and adjust decorations, felt a quiet sense of pride and wonder. She had never imagined that her music could reach so many hearts, or that she could command attention in a room filled with wealth and power. The millionaire, who had been observing her throughout the day, now approached with a calm but serious expression. His earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by genuine respect and fascination. He stood beside her, watching as she carried a tray of empty glasses back to the kitchen, noting the grace and care in her movements. For a long moment he said nothing, simply studying her. Then he spoke, his voice low but sincere. "You've done something remarkable today. Most people would never dare to step forward, and even fewer could move a room the way you did. I want you to know that your talent does not go unnoticed." The girl froze for a moment, unsure of how to respond. She had never been acknowledged like this by someone so powerful. She had faced ridicule, sarcasm, and doubt countless times, and yet here he was, offering her recognition without expectation or mockery. She nodded, a small shy smile forming on her lips. "Thank you," she whispered softly, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She had always dreamed of being recognized for her music, but she never imagined it would happen this way in the middle of a wedding, in a room filled with people she barely knew. The millionaire gestured toward the piano, the grand black instrument that had transformed the room earlier. "Would you play for me again?" he asked. His tone was careful, as though he feared she might refuse. The girl hesitated, looking at the keys that had been her secret world for so long. Then, taking a deep breath, she allowed her fingers to touch the keys once more. The first note floated into the air, soft and deliberate, and the room seemed to hold its breath. She played not for applause, not for recognition, but because she loved the music, because it was a part of her, and because she had something to share that no one else could express in quite the same way. As she played, the guests stopped their conversations again. Even those who had been talking and laughing paused, captivated by the melody. The music was no longer simply entertainment. It was a story, a connection, a reminder that talent could come from anywhere and that courage could change perceptions. The millionaire watched her closely, impressed not only by her technical skill but by the emotion she poured into every note. He realized that he had underestimated her, and more importantly, he understood that greatness could not be judged by wealth, status, or appearances. Guests began to approach quietly, some hesitating at first, unsure if they should interrupt. Then one by one they drew closer, offering compliments, words of admiration, and even quiet apologies for having doubted her. "That was incredible," one guest whispered. "I never imagined someone could play like that," said another. The girl, shy and humble, nodded gently, letting their words sink in. She was not used to such attention, yet she realized that her courage had opened doors she had never dared to approach. Her music had spoken for her when words were not enough, and now the world was listening. Her mother watched nearby, tears glistening in her eyes. She had always known her daughter's talent, had watched her practice in quiet moments, had nurtured her love of music in small, hidden ways. But seeing her recognized in this manner, seeing her courage and skill celebrated openly, filled her with pride and relief. She approached her daughter, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You've done something wonderful," she said softly. "Not everyone gets a chance to be seen like this. Never forget it." The girl smiled, feeling a warm glow in her chest. She had stepped into the light, and for the first time it felt like she truly belonged. The millionaire, still observing, finally spoke again. "I would like to help you," he said. His voice was calm, deliberate, "not just because of what you have done today, but because of what I believe you can do. You have talent, dedication, and courage. Those qualities deserve more than applause. They deserve opportunity." The girl looked at him, stunned. She had never imagined such words coming from someone of his influence. Opportunities had always seemed distant, reserved for those with connections and money. Yet here he was, offering her a chance, recognizing her potential without judgment. He continued, "I can introduce you to people who can help you refine your skills, perform publicly, and share your music with the world. You have a rare gift, and it would be a mistake to keep it hidden any longer." The girl's heart raced. She had dreamed of being recognized, of performing, of sharing her music. But these words were beyond her imagination. She felt a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and disbelief. Could this be real? Could someone actually believe in her the way he did? She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. I would like that," she said. The millionaire smiled, a rare warmth in his expression. "Good," he said. "Then we will make it happen. But remember, talent alone is not enough. Courage, perseverance, and heart are what make someone truly remarkable. You have all of those qualities. Keep playing and the world will take notice." His words, though simple, carried weight. The girl felt a surge of determination. She had faced ridicule, fear, and doubt, yet she had persevered. Now, with recognition and opportunity before her, she understood that her journey was just beginning. As the evening progressed, the girl returned to the piano several more times, each performance more confident and expressive than the last. Guests gathered around, listening intently, sharing in her music, inspired by her courage and skill. The mansion, once filled only with grandeur and polite conversation, had transformed into a space of connection, admiration, and possibility. The girl's music had become a bridge, linking people from different worlds and reminding them that talent and heart could be found anywhere. The staff, who had worked alongside her for years, now looked at her with newfound respect. They had seen her practice quietly, had witnessed her dedication and love for music, and now they were proud to see her recognized publicly. Some quietly congratulated her, others simply smiled, understanding that this was a moment of transformation not just for her, but for everyone around her. The girl, humble as ever, acknowledged their support with soft smiles and nods, knowing that she had not achieved this alone. As the night wore on, the millionaire made a quiet announcement. He praised her skill, her courage, and her dedication, encouraging others to recognize and celebrate hidden talent wherever it might be found. Guests clapped, some standing in admiration, acknowledging that this young girl had changed the tone of the entire event. The girl, standing by the piano once more, felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and fear, yet she had embraced her gift and shared it with the world. And in doing so, she had transformed not only her own life but also the perceptions of those around her. Later, as the wedding came to an end and guests began to leave, the millionaire approached her one last time. "You have a bright future ahead," he said. "Remember what you've learned today. Courage, heart, and dedication will carry you farther than wealth or status ever could. Keep playing, and never let anyone tell you that you are less than your talent deserves." The girl nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She had never heard such words of encouragement from someone so influential, and yet they felt genuine, heartfelt, and transformative. She understood that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. As she walked out of the grand hall with her mother, the girl felt a sense of purpose and excitement. The music that had always been her secret was now a bridge to new opportunities, recognition, and experiences. She realized that courage and talent, when combined, could open doors that had once seemed impossible.